Okay, now this is how people translated the stuff, right? We've been all that way. Nothing new there. Primary. And then we got through the hinting, verbal and non-verbal. We've done that. Anyone try that, hinting itself, before they try the controlling? Any comments?
It was interesting, we went to the little day in, what was it called, or whatever the other day, and on the table, it wasn't verbal, so the principals went, but on the table we had these little hinting cards like, don't leave the room, or have your mobile on silent, so we sort of observant. So without being overt and saying it, there were the hinting cards on the table for principals.
That's good. Who thought of that?
Probably Claude.
No, it's just
It's a
protocol and a norm that we want principals to practice with their staff.
So it was hinting, but it was a
Yeah, it's
hinting.
hinting.
No one said it, it was there.
Okay, so low legitimate power. Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, what about in your class? Has anyone set up a non-verbal try, for example? See, the best schools I've been to, meaning those who've implemented most sort of effectively, those teachers have tried it for 6 months, whatever it is. And then they can either say from themselves, not from me, from themselves, this is worth thinking about, or they didn't bother with it. So it would be really good if you could try the stuff. And then we got to rewards and punishments, as you remember. And we went through all this sort of stuff, yeah. Anyone had any insight into the use of recognitions in their schools since we've highlighted it? Anything that suddenly struck them? Yeah?
I called a parent, this was actually before the PD, but I called a parent because a young boy who struggles in maths had gone from 30% to 60%, was quite pleased with him in a test. And I rang his parents and they were on top of the world. And I've just marked his in test, he got 88%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the recognition from his parents, I think, was amazing.
And what you learn from that is that performance is so arbitrary. It's really interesting because I played with this myself. I've actually, in a class, I experimented, didn't write it up, but I experimented by taking responsibility for any failure just to see what would happen. I thought I'd play this game. So I said, who can't do science? And a whole bunch of hands go in there and I say, oh wow, that's a pity. Okay, what if I cut out half the curriculum and went sort of real slow? Who couldn't do it then? And a certain number of hands went down. And I said, okay, the rest of you, what if I got you a tutor? Would you be able to do it then? And a few more hands went down. So I said, what if I tutored you after school? And eventually I got to the point where almost no hands in the air. And so I said, so look, just to summarise, it's not that you can't do it, it's just that we don't have the resources, right? I can't give you what you need. And it's not my fault, by the way, it's the teachers last year and the year before. So I'm going to feel really lousy when you fail my tests. But there's not much I can do about it, I guess. And I just left that sit there for a while, and I noticed in the first test just about everybody got, and I'd been doing this for 7 years in a row. While I was at uni, I was teaching a year 10 and a year 8. So I was able to see that instead of getting a pretty well a normal distribution with about 70 average, just about everyone got an A and B on that first topic test. And I thought, this is a bit curious, the first year. But I tried again with the next, and I kept talking like this and saying how devastated I'm going to be because I'll feel that I'm really not doing what I need to do, but I don't have the resources and I certainly don't have the time, but it's a pity. And I could hold them until about May. And I kept the correlations because I was going to report it. The correlations with maths just disappeared. There were no correlations with maths because there was no variation in my results. They were all very high. I did it for something like 4 years first, changing topics in the science to see if it was ecology, mechanics, da-da-da-da. It made no difference, but I could not hold it beyond May in a secondary school because whatever it is, it didn't last. They couldn't believe in themselves long enough. But it just made me realise, like you saying, how fickle performance is. It's not competence as much as confidence and background. So if they've got the background and the confidence, they should be able to do it. But they will choose not to do it. They'll choose not to do it. They won't know they're choosing not to do it. And I think that's a different way of looking at performance. It's if they've got a difficult background, gaps, then it's not such a choice because it's very hard to choose to do it because you'd have to pick up on some of that stuff. But there will be a bunch of people in schools who are choosing not to learn. Who could, like you say, a couple of phone calls home, they could choose to learn. It's really spooky, you know, because we look at it as such a fixed thing, like intelligence and stuff like that. Anyhow, sidetrack. So we got to here, we played the game, and now we got to here. Remember this? So I said to you I could do this for anyone, is that right? So what I'm going to do is expect you to do the following. Turn to your notes and I'll show you what pages we're going to work from. It'll be pages number 12 and 13. Have a look at those. And on the bottom of 13 it says the following. Form groups of 4. That's what you're going to do in a minute. You're going to form groups of 4. And in each group you'll number yourself 1 to 4. Do that first. Instantly become a group of 4 numbered 1 to 4, even if you have to move around tables to do it. So if I asked you what did you learn, if anything, from that experience, what would you say? Stop and reflect for a minute. You just had 15 minutes, 20 minutes of doing that stuff. Did you learn anything from that? If so, what might it have been? What did you learn? Yeah, because you are in an adult environment. Yep, so just because you can do it here doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it in a classroom, although you will the first time until they start to control you. And then you'll lose it. Yep, what else?
Think about the situations first before we get into it, so that you have your scripts prepared.
Okay, yep. It's like that thing we did with the tap dancing. The more prepared you are, the better you are, the less threatening the whole situation will be, the more professional you're likely to stay. Yep. Somebody else, yes?
The fact that you can use your body language a little bit more and get closer to the kid.
Yep. The power of body language is what you're noticing. That you're gonna, yeah, and therefore if you're really keen on sort of connection, especially because you're talking like a secondary course, it's more likely middle years you're going to not try and pick them up in a big group because you know, well, some kids you would, certainly wouldn't, because they lose face and then they'll act out and they'll feel compelled to argue with you and it just goes from bad to worse. So the more expert power you've got, the more legitimate power you've got, and that's up to grade 4 you're pretty safe. After that it depends. The more you can afford just to cross the room to say something without, but even then across the room it can be distracting. However, across the room you're teaching values, you're teaching rights. So I don't see it as an interruption to learning at all. It may be an interruption to the content you're learning at that moment, but it is teaching them that people have a right to learn without interruption, even though it's paradoxical because you're interrupting them. But you are teaching them then about, in that moment, it's a lesson on civics, just those few minutes. So I don't feel so bad as I used to in, let's say, old assertive models. And there are books written on, called, what's it called, Attention by Ryan, that says the minimal intervention is the best, so we could use that as a principle. The minimal disruption you can cause is of course the best. But he was thinking that it was something in addition to curriculum. In other words, when I said, look, you're speaking, they can't hear, be quiet, he would have seen that as irrelevant to the curriculum. I'm saying that statement is actually integral